Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that Israel is prepared to launch a large-scale military campaign against Hamas, even during an election period, as Palestinian faction Islamic Jihad is calling Israel's action in Gaza a declaration of war. We'll be live with our defence correspondent on the border. Jordan's foreign ministry has summoned the Israeli ambassador in Amman after violent clashes erupted between Muslim and Jewish worshippers and Israeli police at the Temple Mount last week. And Gibraltar has rejected a request by the US to again seize an Iranian tanker that it's been holding since July on suspicion of transporting oil to Syria. Hello, I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. We begin in Gaza, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just come out to say that Israel will not hesitate to launch a large-scale offensive military campaign on Gaza, even during an election campaign, if such an operation is necessary. Now, this is Hamas is accusing Israel of a despicable crime for killing 3 armed militants on the Israel-Gaza border overnight, while Islamic Jihad has come out to call Israel's latest action a declaration of war. The IDF fired flares in the northern Gaza Strip to locate the armed suspects before firing at them with an attack helicopter and a tank. The Hamas Health Authority identifying them as 3 men in their mid-20s, declining to take responsibility, calling them rebellious youth. Here's the Prime Minister speaking just before boarding a plane to Kiev.
I heard people say I avoid a wide-scale operation in Gaza because of the elections. Everybody who knows me knows my considerations are legitimate and true. I work in complete collaboration with the security forces in a forceful and a level-headed manner. If required, we will launch a wide-scale operation in Gaza with no relation whatsoever to the elections.
And for more, let's bring in Dr. Chuck Freilich, who's a former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor. Chuck, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Tell me, what do you make of Israel's decision not to contain these attacks, like we've heard from the Prime Minister, saying that Israel will react strongly?
Well, he didn't say that Israel will. He said that Israel might, despite the elections. And I think it's the kind of statement that one would expect the Prime Minister to make. He's certainly not going to come out and say, we're not going to do it because of the elections.
But in the past, he has come out and said that Israel will respond with force.
And he said today that we may respond with force as well. I think this was about as little as he could possibly say. And we may be forced to use force. I would hope very much that that's not the case. There's always this tendency after any one of these rounds for people to want some sort of a strong response. But the really wise way to go about things is to think, what's the end result of using force? Will we actually achieve anything that is significantly better than we are today? And the bottom line is that probably not. Who's going to take over if we go in big time and destroy Hamas? Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Is that what we want?
So do you believe containing these attacks is the right way to go?
Absolutely. It's an extraordinarily painful thing for people, especially near Gaza, to have to live with, and we've been living this for a couple of decades, but we're probably going to have to continue doing this for a long time to come.
So do you know, most Israelis do not follow this sort of logic. Where do you believe there's room to go from here?
No, I think, as a matter of fact, most Israelis do. And if you look at the polls, they show that most people do not want a major military campaign. And as a matter of fact, the Prime Minister, who has headed a hard right-wing government for years now, and in recent months, an hard right government, has continued to pursue a rather moderate policy when it comes to Gaza. No one thinks that there's a good solution, so better not try and do it.
So let's move on now to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, with the Israeli government banning them from making a visit here on Saturday. We have seen plenty of backlash over this. There's even a Twitter hashtag trending. Tell me, what do you see as being the ongoing repercussions of this decision?
Well, I think they're going to be severe. Not in the short term, we'll get over it. But in the long term, the blow to Israel's relations with liberal America, democratic America, and 80% of American Jewry, which is democratic, the blow is significant, and it's not just this one event. It's coming on the background of numerous events in recent years. First and foremost, the Prime Minister's confrontation with President Obama over the Iran nuclear issue. And there is a lot of anger. And we've seen in the last year a severe decrease in support for Israel on the Democratic side, to the point where there's now a small majority who favor the Palestinians, not Israel. I'm afraid that it's soon going to become a significant majority, and if we don't do something very soon, we're going to be in trouble. Sooner or later, there will be a Democratic president.
Certainly. Dr. Chuck
Eventually.
Freilich, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, let's go to our defence correspondent, Jonathan Regev, who is standing by on the Israeli-Gaza border. Jonathan, thank you for joining me this evening. A few very tense days in the area where you're standing by there. Tell me, what is the very situation at this hour where you are now?
Sunday, Sarah, was a quiet yet a tense day here on the Israel-Gaza border. This follows 2 nights of rocket fire from the Gaza Strip there behind us into Israeli territory. And, of course, overnight there was also the incident in which there was an attempted infiltration from Gaza with various terrorists killed. Eventually, as they tried to cross into Israel, they were killed by IDF forces. As far as today, we know of one fire that has ignited on the southern side of the border. This probably due to an incendiary balloon from Gaza into Israel. Apart from that, it was a quiet day, but of course there's a great feeling of tension with high levels of violence we've seen over the past few weeks, more than we've seen in the weeks before that. And of course here the great fear is that this could lead into something bigger, which obviously no one here on the Israeli side wants to see.
Jonathan Regev on the Israel-Gaza border, really appreciate the update. Thanks so much. Now, staying in the region, and politicians are calling for Israel to take a tough stance against terrorism from Gaza. On a tour of the Gush Etzion settlement bloc, Yamina list candidate Naftali Bennett came out to say that Israel's deterrence is being eroded and said it must go on the offensive without elaborating how. Now, addressing the upcoming elections, Yamina Chair Ayelet Shaked urged the ruling Likud party to stop attacking her party, saying that if it doesn't stop, that shows the Likud wants to establish a left-wing government. Meanwhile, Jordan's foreign ministry has summoned the Israeli ambassador in Amman, Amir Weisbrod, after violent clashes between Muslim and Jewish worshippers and Israeli police at the Temple Mount last week, with Jordan condemning the activity, demanding it be stopped immediately. Now, Jerusalem has approved the meeting called for by Jordan, with Amman's foreign ministry spokesperson saying the ambassador has been sent a message that the kingdom demands Israel immediately cease its provocations on the Temple Mount, which it says amplifies the conflict and violates international law. There's been a major terror attack in Afghanistan, with a suicide bomber killing 63 people and wounding more than 180 others in an attack on a wedding hall in Kabul. Now, the explosion happened late Saturday in an area of the city mostly populated by Shia Muslims who've been targeted by jihadist groups, with ISIS claiming responsibility earlier today. Now, the explosion comes just 10 days after a huge bomb outside a Kabul station killed at least 14 people and injured nearly 150 others.
We have suffered a lot of pain. Our message to the world is that we are not going to leave our soil, even if hundreds of suicide attacks happen. This is our soil, our birthplace, and we want freedom. We want peace, not such brutal suicide attacks.
And we're going out for a short break, but when we come back, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is being called out by other parliament members as he departs on a trip to Ukraine. We'll tell you why they're not happy right after this. Stay with us.
politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern.
On Stateside, it's not just about delivering the news. It's about giving meaning to the news and doing so with clarity.
These families waiting to get into the country, how long will they be in detention? What
happens around the rest of the world can have a huge impact on the United States. And what happens in the United States can have a huge impact on the rest of the world. That's Stateside.
News 24 is a Spanish-language weekly news magazine on I-24 News, presented by respected journalists Carlos Gurovich and Damian Pachter, bringing you news and analysis of the most important issues of the Middle East and Israel, with the added perspective of the impact on the Spanish-speaking world. News 24, only on I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's go now to Israeli elections. And Israel Beitanu party leader Avigdor Lieberman is accusing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of flying off to Ukraine to film propaganda videos for the elections. Now, Netanyahu is already en route to participate in a memorial ceremony for the Holocaust-era massacre at Babi Yar. Now, it's the first visit by an Israeli leader since Netanyahu last visited 20 years ago, also during an election campaign. Now, his visit is being criticised as an attempt to win support from Ukrainian Israelis and ply them away from Israel Beitanu. Our correspondent Pierre Clochendler is with the Prime Minister on that trip and filed this report just before leaving Ben Gurion Airport in the Greater Tel Aviv district.
On the program of the visit of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Ukraine, a memorial visit at the Babi Yar memorial site. And of course, the signing of economic cooperation agreement and trying to advance the issue of the pension of Ukrainian immigrants who came to Israel in the 1990s. And of course, the meeting with the most intriguing leader today, the president-actor Volodymyr Zelensky, a Jewish president receiving the Jewish Prime Minister, the first official visit of a head of state to Ukraine. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can only envy Volodymyr Zelensky of his landslide victory in both presidential and parliamentary elections a few months ago. And that's just 1 month before Prime Minister Netanyahu is battling for survival in the Israeli election exactly in a month from now. And of course, the elections are the ulterior motive, the hidden face of this election. The goal, according to political analysts and to leaders of opposition parties, to grab as much as Russian or Ukrainian votes from the party of Avigdor Lieberman. And that's why, to the extent that Avigdor Lieberman today on Facebook said that the Prime Minister is preferring to direct propaganda films for the elections instead of taking care of the Israeli residents who live in proximity of the Gaza Strip. And that's exactly what will happen. The renewal of tension with Hamas in the Gaza Strip risks haunting the Prime Minister during his 2-day official visit. This is Pierre Clochendler, I-24 News, at the Israeli Ben Gurion International Airport.
Now to the tensions between Iran and the US, and Gibraltar is refusing to seize the tanker which was previously seized by British Royal Marines on suspicion it was trying to take oil to Syria, a violation of EU sanctions. And we are seeing live images of that ship now coming in, which has since been given the go-ahead to depart, raising Iranian flags as it is leaving. Now, a federal court in Washington issuing a warrant for the seizure, but Gibraltar is responding, saying it will not comply, releasing a statement saying the EU sanctions regime against Iran, which is applicable in Gibraltar, is much narrower than that is applicable in the US. Argentina's economy minister Nicolas de Hovne has stepped down after President Mauricio Macri's defeat in a primary poll ahead of a general election, which sparked an economic crisis. Now, de Hovne releasing a statement saying that he's convinced that under the circumstances, the government's management needs significant renewal in the economic arena. De Hovne is likely to be replaced by Hernan Lacunza, who's the economy minister for the Buenos Aires province. Now, the country's peso ended the week having shed 20% of its value against the US dollar. A little earlier, I spoke with the anchor of our Spanish show News 24, Damien Patch, to break it all down.
Well, Nicolas Dujovne took office in 2016 and he had only one job. His job was to reach an agreement with the IMF because the Argentine economy was already almost in recession. They stopped getting debt from the markets, so the only salvation to the country's economy was a deal with the IMF. So he reached that. However, the economy keep on going and down. The inflation kept on going. The currency keep on losing its value. And suddenly we arrive 2 years later to an election, 3 years later, sorry. And the government expect to lose by a very narrow difference. However, the result was a total surprise, and the government, Mauricio Macri administration, lost the primary elections by 50% difference. So it's a huge, it's an unexpected thing, an unexpected surprise that took the markets completely shocked. And the day after the results, the Argentine peso lost 30% of its value in 24 hours.
Wow.
The next election, the general election, the first round is going to take place on the end of October, and the difference is so big, the gap is so big between the opposition, which won the primaries elections. The gap is so big that apparently Mauricio Macri won't be in another term in office. Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Kirchner are going back to the presidency office. That's how it looks for now.
Now, a long-standing tradition in US politics, Iowa can make or break a presidential candidate's run for the White House. This rural Midwestern state is the first to hold its primaries with the famed Iowa caucuses in February 2020. And for the many Democrats vying for their party's nomination, the Iowa State Fair is an essential campaign stop.
Hi, thanks for stopping by to vote.
Here at the Iowa State Fair, visitors can vote for their favorite presidential candidate, more than a year out from the 2020 elections. The ballots at this largely agricultural fair are corn kernels, and the many Democratic candidates are all represented. On the Republican side, Donald Trump appears all but guaranteed his party's nomination.
Trend today is all Republicans are voting for Donald Trump. All Democrats are split, mostly with Biden at 35%.
Nice to see you again.
The former vice president is the frontrunner in national polls and is treated like a movie star here. But even the less well-known candidates hit up the fair with the hopes of making a name for themselves in this early voting state.
The shortage of both. I've only been in this race for about 10 weeks, yet it's my 8th trip to Iowa. And I've listened and I've learned from you.
Next February, Iowans will select their preferred candidate in the Iowa caucuses, often seen as an early indicator for each party's eventual nominee. The fair is a crucial way for candidates to connect with the voters who could make or break their presidential dreams. But not without a little fun, in the form of pig races and fried corn dog tastings. Every 4 years, farmers like John, a Trump supporter, watch as the politics of Washington come storming into the state.
The Iowa State Fair is pretty much the kickoff for the presidential candidates to get ready for the caucuses. Get your name out, get with the people.
Mike is taking his voting responsibility very seriously. The environmental activist went to see every single Democratic candidate at the fair this year.
I don't think it's dividing the party, but I think we need to start weeding some of them out to eliminate them. I think they need to self-select and say, I'm only at 1%.
After a long and grueling campaign season filled with debates, dropouts, and plenty of drama, in July 2020, the Democratic National Convention will finally reveal their pick to face Donald Trump. And this predominantly white and Christian state, whose population represents only 1% of voters in the U.S., will ultimately determine who stays in the race.
Now, the warming of ties between Israel and the US under President Donald Trump has seen great benefits for the Jewish state, but some argue there are also significant risks involved. In a special interview to Israel Business Weekly on I-24 News, Israeli philanthropist and entrepreneur Morris Kahn says that Israel should use a little more caution. Let's take a listen.
As an Israeli, how do you think about Trump and also, those around you?
There's no question that Israelis feel that Trump's support has been tremendous for them. But I'm afraid that actually he's given us a sense of security, and we're doing things that I think we should perhaps not do. I think that the backing that we've got from Trump might make us a little bit overconfident, and I think we should be a little bit more cautious. I'm concerned. I really am.
Moving on, and an Israeli NGO aiming to connect Jewish and Arab youth through technology and innovation is joined by a delegation of Chinese students sent by Chinese companies to learn the secrets of Israeli startups. Here's more.
Jewish, Arab, and Chinese students solving problems together. This unusual mix takes place in Muna, a space for change, an NGO in the northern Arab town of Majd al-Qum.
The most challenge in Israel is separated of the society. It's not just defense or security. The challenge is that all the society is divided to groups, and economically, the idea is how to develop the region by the fact that you connected people to technology.
Muna's programs give high school and college students skills for entering Israel's tech sector. One such activity is the hackathon.
I joined Muna in a hackathon like this. I didn't know anything. When I saw what we managed to build, I was very excited and decided to continue and get involved in more projects like drones and robotics.
This hackathon is joined by a delegation of kids from China.
Our company sent 20 kids here to learn from the startup and innovation nation. Israel is famous worldwide for this.
Participants develop critical thinking and teamwork by constructing and solving technology-oriented escape room-style riddles.
All the people will come here to, including the Israeli, Arabic, and Chinese, right? So this is a place to communicate and build the relationship between the countries. I will bring back the creative and innovation spirit. I mean, this is a very precious things I learned in the Israel, and the China needs this stuff.
The participants managed to connect despite the language barrier.
We see new kids that don't speak in the same language, and we need to try to talk with them, and we learn new things every day, and it's really fun.
Muna recently opened another center in the southern Bedouin town of Rahat, spreading the concept of growth and cooperation through the use of technology and innovation.
Yeah, and just to go back to our top news story of the hour, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just come out to say that Israel will not hesitate to launch a large-scale offensive military campaign on Gaza, even during an election campaign, if such an operation is necessary. Now, this is Hamas is accusing Israel of a despicable crime for killing 3 armed militants on the Israel-Gaza border overnight, while Islamic Jihad has come out to call Israel's latest action a declaration of war. Now, the IDF fired flares in the northern Gaza Strip to locate the armed suspects before firing at them with an attack helicopter and then a tank. Now, the Hamas Health Authority is identifying them as 3 men in their mid-20s declining to take responsibility, calling them rebellious youth. And that is all we have time for this edition of I24 News, but we are continuing to bring you all of the breaking stories, so do go ahead and visit us online, i24news.tv. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.
Unflinching, out.